Yep, that's me. You're probably wondering how I got myself into this situation. Well, it all started 2 days ago.
Greetings, ladies and ladies, and welcome to an unusual kind of video. As many of you surely will know, we're currently celebrating really, the ORKTOBER. That time of the year where GW puts special care and attention to the hilarious hooligans that are the orcs. Now, incidentally, the month of October is apparently a great time for many other events to take place. Most importantly to me, the INKTOBER. For everyone unfamiliar with the term, the INKTOBER is a challenge that takes place every year since 2009, challenging people to paint a picture every day to a daily specific random prompt. The hook being that you're only allowed to use ink, hence the name. So we've got ORKTOBER and INKTOBER, and as someone who really likes both of these themes, I thought we should give it a go and try to combine these two, by painting an orc model using only black acrylic ink. Will this work? I don't know, but it's for sure gonna be a lot of fun. The orcs we'll be using today are the 3 Iron Jaws from the Warhammer Underworld's Beastgrave box set. Now, I don't play this game myself, and really the only reason I got these guys is because they were the most cost-effective set locally available, but the models themselves are rather neat, and I think they'll serve us just fine for this project. Okay, let's get going with our first orc for today. In this method, I'll be using 2 different kinds of traditional ink. A pure black acrylic ink and some black calligraphy ink, which has a slight greenish bluish tint to it when it dries. I have never done anything like this ever before, but I have somewhat of a plan in mind. So, let's go. First I want to start off with the skin, for which I'm using the calligraphy ink and a big brush. As you can see, the ink seems to be a bit offended regarding my sacrilegious use of it. The primer apparently has somewhat of a lotus effect here, but no need to panic. Staying persistent with my brush strokes, I got the paint to settle in the end. Well, at least mostly, for there are still a few spots where the ink really didn't want to be, but that's fine. Even ink has boundaries, and I don't want to push it too hard right away. Anyway, after the skin was done, I switched over to the acrylic ink and used it to paint his trousers and the loincloth, which, by comparison, went extremely smoothly. As we only really have one color, we need to be a little bit creative when painting different parts of the model, so I watered the ink down with water when I moved to the bandages. So far I think the paint job doesn't look half bad, though a little bit rough on the skin maybe. Having the skin and the clothing done, there's only the armor and other metallic parts left. When inking the armor, I wanted it to stay mostly white and only outline the plates with the black ink. In between moving to the next armor plate, I often took some white paint to clean up some spots where I previously messed up, and then continued inking on the clean canvas. When I had to clean up spots of the calligraphy ink though, the ink would always mix with the white paint and create even more of a mess. Here I had to really put in a lot of paint and patience to get my clean white back, but even then a little bit of staining would remain. Speaking of patience, this whole process took a lot of time, as I was essentially highlighting with a very fluid color on a surface where mistakes could not be reversed easily. And hence all of these parts would stand out from the rest of the model, there weren't really shortcuts either. This comes especially true on his weapon, the double mace. Here I wanted to catch all of the raised lines of the core, as well as the base of every single spike. I switched to one of my finest brushes here and had to really focus on what I was doing, painting clean lines while avoiding the spikes and other bits. Bit for bit I moved further up until I reached the top, which really was a relief. I think the org looks great so far, and we could definitely call it done and move on, but there is still room for some upgrades I think. First, I need to paint the grip of his mace, which I forgot. That taken care of, I took the calligraphy ink again and did a little bit of simple shading on the muscles, giving his whole body more depth and definition. Not gonna lie, after the experience with the white paint, I feared that another layer would break the previous one, but thankfully, nothing like that happened. Next I switched back to the acrylic ink to put down more details on the armor. I could just paint to my heart's content, sketching scratches and hinting some dents in the metal. The only thing I had to pay attention to was me not getting carried away and overdoing it, as the white of the armor is still meant to be the dominating part here. Lastly, I took the calligraphy ink again and put down a healthy portion of it on the ground to catch all of the little rocks and pebbles. The big ones I just left alone. After that, I just painted the trim of the base white and called this orc done. But before we take a closer look to how he turned out, I want to show you guys the two other ideas I came up with. Moving on with the second orc of the batch, I put the traditional inks aside in favor of something more modern. Markers and fineliners. These markers have a tip resembling the bristles of a brush, and I have high hopes for them doing really well here. The fineliners are meant for detailing, and I even got my finest one out with a tip of only 0.05mm in diameter. A quick comparison to a regular sized fineliner. Let's see what we can achieve with these mediums. Just like before, I want to start on the skin, using a light, warm grey. The difference to the primer is really minuscule, but we need to keep in mind that we can only darken down and not brighten up our colors again once we put them down, so starting off light and easy is definitely the way to go. Once I was done with the skin, I took a light but cold grey for the bandages and the trousers, before moving on with a slightly darker grey on the armor. So far, everything is going very smoothly and so quick as well. The handling of the markers felt very natural, and hence I always had the right amount of paint on the tip, I could just keep going. The paint also dried without tite marks or other complications. Not even an hour in, and all of the base colors were fully applied. But he really does look flat for now, so we ought to do something about that. Starting on the skin again, I took a darker warm grey tone and carefully applied shadows. As I said before, we can't really brighten these parts up again, so we need to be very cautious when painting in the shadows. After the skin, I wanted to repeat this step on the armor, but here is where I might have made a mistake. You're of course invited to share your thoughts on this, but I think that I picked a grey a few tones too dark for the base layer. The dents and scratches I filled in all stand out a little too much to my liking, and I hope that it doesn't confuse the eye later. When I realized this, I took the same grey as before to tackle the remaining dents, so that the contrast wouldn't be as harsh. Again, we've reached a point where we could call it a day on this boy, but there's still a little more I want to try here. Taking the fineliners, I started to clearly separate some parts of the model from another, intensifying the contrast. This worked especially well on the collar of his armor. Then I took my smallest fineliner to work in some very fine lines like scratches and dents into the armor again. They're not really visible from afar, but they really give the model a lot of character when viewed up close, I think. Though I think I took it a step too far when I tried this on the bandages. There's still a lot of parts completely white, and honestly, I want to leave them like this. I think they're excellent accents on the overall model, and as for now, I feel like I'm content with how the style looks. Regarding the base, it's safe to say that the rough surface would absolutely destroy my markers, so I think I'm allowed to cheat a little bit and use a pale brown here. And besides, this color suits the rest of the model really well, wouldn't you agree? After the paint was dry, I just gave it a quick wash for more definition and finished the whole thing by painting the trim in a bright white. Wow, we're already on the last orc, and for my last idea I wanna ask you, What if we used colored markers instead of just grey tones? So let's get ourselves a bunch of those and go to town. As before, I started on the skin, taking a vibrant light green. And yes, this is light green, although it looks like vibrant yellow on the camera. After that, I immediately started on the shadows with some dark green, which was quite tricky because the tip didn't possess the qualities of a brush like the other ones did. Next off is the armor, for which I originally wanted to take yellow as in the original Iron Jaws color scheme, but then settled for orange as the yellow was just too light to really fit this orc. This step took surprisingly long, probably just because of how much this one is wearing. After the armor was all done, I painted the trousers with a dark brown and the bandages in a light beige. Turning back to the armor, I chose a Bordeaux red for the many spikes coming out of it. I thought about taking blue, but then went with something more complementary than contrasting. For the tufts of hair, I just chose a purple marker. Our orc has already come most of the way, and I feel he looks really retro with these screaming bright colors. At this point, I didn't really know how to paint the blades and hats, so I just took my fine liner again and started to sketch some details in. Honestly, this might just be the most fun part on this and the last model, as it is so easy to use and control, and you can really just do whatever you want. Even if I'm not gonna paint more models this way, I think this fine liner might definitely come in handy at a later date. Though I said that intensifying the contrast on the bandages was a bit much earlier, I think it works in this case where everything is just so extra and screaming for attention anyway. This was the moment I remembered that I indeed had some grey markers in my possession, so I painted the blades with those, and even worked in some non-metallic metal action on the cutting edges. I also used this grey for the hats on his belt, mainly because I didn't want to give them any attention and just wanted them to blend in with the rest of the model. For the base, I again couldn't use my markers, so to stay true with the retro theme we've got on here, I painted the stones in a medium dark grey and then used a light green for the pebbles. This time I even took care of the details like the skull and the ripped off teeth on the ground. And by painting this last white trim, we can call our experiments officially done. So let's go through them, shall we? I just love how the first one turned out. This style was the first I came up with when thinking about making this video, and it also pretty much stays most true to our Inktober crossover, so I am really happy that everything looks the way I hoped it would. I mean, yes, I definitely had some problems with this one. The calligraphy ink didn't want to behave, and painting all of the black lines was a mega chore, but I'm more than content with the end result, so I'm happy that I pulled through. The second orc definitely is the beginner friendliest. He got done blazingly fast and it was a really rewarding experience to paint him. On top of that, he just looks so good. Very simple, yes, but at the same time the colors are all so well balanced that the model just looks complete, even with the many bits still white. If I was to paint, like, a start collecting box in one of these styles, I'd definitely take this. And last but not least, our colorful boy. Man, oh man, was I certain that he would be the ugliest model I painted in the last few years. But honestly, now that he's done, he doesn't look half bad. In fact, I think he looks even more like a comic character than the first one does. In the end, he really grew on me, though I had a lot of trouble painting him. There were so many weird angles that the paint just couldn't reach that I had to go over it with a paintbrush to fill at least some of the white spots. And even now there's still a lot of white left here. Nonetheless, I think he looks good the way I intended for him to look, so I'm happy. But what do you think? What orc do you like the most? And would you like to see something similar again in the future? Whatever the case, I hope you had a lot of fun watching this video, and maybe even recommend it to a friend who might like it too. And if you didn't, recommend it to a foe, so they may suffer as well. And that leaves us with just one thing unattended. Greetings, ladies and laddies. It's been a while, hasn't it? I think I have a little bit of explaining to do. In the last couple of months, I have definitely overextended myself, like a lot. I've taken a lot more projects than I should have, and didn't really get anything done. That's already bad enough, but when this month began, I got seriously sick, like very sick. I didn't leave my bed for 2.5 weeks, and after that needed another like 10 days to fully recover from that. Some late symptoms are still there, but I'm mostly fine. There's no need to worry. I had so much planned for this month. Like, all the time, like over the last 2 months, I was like, okay, whenever I get sick, it needs to not be October, because I have a lot to do in October. And then I got sick in October, so yeah, nice. Well, no sense in dwelling in the past when the future lies directly in front of us. I have a lot of stuff planned for the rest of this year, and I'm really excited to make it all become reality. Though, I think I've learned my lesson and will take it a little bit easy from here on out. At least kinda. Now, that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I wish you all a happy Halloween. Until next time, take care.